Hey team, it's John. You're on the JRB Tree Climbing channel, also the name of my website, of my Patreon, and my Facebook group. You've heard me use the analogy, tools in your toolbox. Well, I've got a new tool for your toolbox today. You've also heard me state that if I can improve things, I reserve the right to make it better. And I've got an improvement here, a new tool for your toolbox. I'll be using this in place of the Running JRB Hitch. So familiarize yourself with the JRB Hitch and the Running JRB Hitch. Familiarize yourself with the Highwayman's Hitch and what I call the Running Highwayman's Hitch. This can be safely described as a variant of the Running Highwayman's Hitch as I defined it in the prior video. And we're going to give this the name, the Maverick Hitch. I've discussed this with my team. We're pretty certain there's not prior art, but if there is, if you're aware that someone has tied this knot before, please leave me a link and we will give credit to that individual or that name. In the meantime, we're going to be calling this the Maverick Hitch. The dictionary.com definition of Maverick, one of them is unorthodox, unconventional, or nonconformist, disruptive thinking. And we've got something here, generally speaking, a retrievable canopy anchor that's not fashioned with any mechanical devices. Well, I need access to the end of the rope. It's not tied in the bight. It's not tied. It's not midline attachable. It's not so simple that I could tie it without looking at it like I just did. And if it were quick release, generally speaking, quick release hitches and canopy anchors, these are mutually exclusive. But we're capable of locking this hitch. And there's several ways to lock it. And I'm going to show you in detail how to do so. But it's running hitch, right? So I can send it up into the canopy and send it up and subject it to my body weight. We'll just do that here in a crude fashion. So that hitch doesn't know if I was climbing on it all day. It just knows it's seen my body weight. But we can, a little effort, run it back down. You can run it back down. If I do have access to the end of the rope, instead of using that carabiner as a toggle, I can simply flip the end through. I can repeat the procedure. And I can bring it down without the toggle. And lastly, I can explode the hitch in the canopy. I can explode it in the canopy, and I'll show you this in detail. I always send it up locked, and climb on it locked. This time, just to demonstrate the hitch's properties, I'm going to send it up unlocked. So this bight is not locked. Send it up. So I would have climbed on that, right? So I would have climbed on it. I've spent my time or done my work, whatever I was doing in the tree. As my last action before rappel, I would have unlocked it. I'd arrived down at the ground. And now I have an option. Instead of retrieving it and fighting all that friction, I can simply release it and pull down my rope. The hitch is extremely strong. I've done strength tests on it, and the numbers I was getting, the hitch was basically achieving near the minimum breaking strength of the cords. It's extremely strong. Your results might vary with different materials. My point is, we're always climbing on ropes that are capable of sustaining loads more than 20 times what we're actually giving them. So it's extremely strong. In a static rope climbing application, there's no way we can achieve anywhere near testing its strength profile. And it's extremely stable, meaning I can't easily destabilize it once it's in the canopy. Okay, let's take you into detail and show you how to tie it. Okay, so let's tie the Maverick Hitch. I've got my rope over my tree crotch, which is just out of your field of view. And I like to adopt the convention where I use the left side as my load side and the right side as my working end or my release side. I'm right-handed, and it's easier to form the hitch this way. But I'll show it to you both ways. I start by creating an overhand loop in this fashion. You can spin the rope. You can put a spin as if you're putting a bottle cap on, and that'll create that overhand loop with one crossing point here. So that's the starting point. That's step one. I then take that working end, go around the back, and overlay on top of the original bite. And the last step is to take the working end and simply put it up and through. Up and through. Now, to dress it, I'll pull this towards me and down. I want this to open up. I want this to open up like that. And that's all I do to dress it. Just a tiny little tug here. Because I need this to run. I still need it to run. And I'm careful to check that, again, that my left and right haven't got mixed up. So left won't. That'll still be my load side. But the running end, the right side is the running end. It should be on the right side of this bite. I'll put that through. So here, I'm going to just run that up slightly, and we're going to zoom in. We're going to take a real close look at that. So this knot has kind of got some, it's pretty inspectable. We've got closest to us, we've got a bite sticking out kind of like a nose, and I guess these would be the two vertical bars right underneath it, and that overlays a bite in a horizontal fashion. So it's kind of symmetrical. And again, I make sure that the right side is my moving end. The right side is the release line, and it's on the right, and the left is my load side. Let's come back out. Let's go ahead and run it up, which is only going to be less than a hand span. Okay. Now, we've got several ways to lock this. The first way to lock it is with, if I'm going to explode the hitch, if I'm going to explode it, well, then all I really do is I'll leave a nice long bite here. Always leave a long bite. And I'll just take my carabiner and I'll put it through that loop, and I'll just put it through both strands. And I will run it up, and I will spend my time there. And before I rappel, I remove the carabiner and attach my release cord here, attach my release cord to it. I rappel down to the ground, and then I spill a hitch. Now, if we wanted to run the hitch backwards, let's tie it again. Overhand loop with one crossing point. Bring it towards me, and I verify that the right side is running. It's my release side. Put that up and through. Okay, so I've got a couple different options for how, if I wanted to run the hitch backwards. I recommend the use of a carabiner for this. And what we do is we simply widen this bite, put the release line through it, and put the carabiner here capturing that release loop in this fashion. This is the easiest to retrieve. As long as I've got this vertical line here, the release line up on the right side, I can run that up, and then I can pull on this to run it back down. Okay, now if I don't have a carabiner and I want to run it back, we still can. Again, it's important that we have it tied as described with the release side on the right, but I can simply tuck this through. So this will come back down. It's just a little bit more work. So I would send it up, and now when it's time to retrieve, this may capsize a little bit when I start to pull on this. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that'll capsize first, and then it'll start to run down. And then at the bottom, simply explode it. I'll intentionally make a mistake this time. If I form the hitch, and instead of just going right through, I put a loop in it, and I'm overlaying it. So now I've got the release line exiting at the bottom, and I didn't catch that. I put this up and through, and I didn't catch the fact that the release line is on the left instead of the right. This is still going to work fine. It's still, I mean, it looks good in inspection. It's still going to work fine if I just lock it, run it up, and explode it. It works absolutely fine. But if I want to run it back down, it can jam up, especially if I do it this way. So I don't know if it'll happen this time, but I've tested this 1,000 times, and so this can get a little jammed up right there. And so it's my preference to always tie it the same way. I'll do it one more time. Up and through. And I tend to lock it. That's just easier to use a carabiner if you got one. Up and through. If we tie this sloppy, this is incredible. It self-tightens. It just finds its way. Let me intentionally be really sloppy about this, right? I'm not even going to address this at all. I'm just going to, I mean, look at that mess. I mean, that's just, I didn't, it's just, but you send that up. It finds its way. It jams up and it tightens nicely. I'm not recommending this. I'm just saying you don't have to go, crazy setting it. If you set it too hard, it won't run as well. And lastly, if you ever needed to tie it in the opposite chirality so that the right side is the load side and the left side is the release side, well, everything's the same. You just, you want to practice it if you're going to use it this way. So everything is exactly the same. I would overlay this, the left side over the right with one crossing point. I go around top to bottom. And then I put this through. I don't tie it this way all the time, so I'll inspect it. I've got my load side on the right. I want my running end on the left form this loop. It does. Good. I'll put this up and through. I would lock it in whatever fashion I wanted to. I'll put it in running mode. I'd run it up into the tree. I'd run it back down. I'd release this. Okay, so if you're going to use this in obviously you're going to run it up into the tree, but I asked that you test and try this here at ground height because I never run it back. I always explode it. It's just so much easier. I'll tie it in real time. This is how long it takes me to tie. And I would simply, I'll lock it in soft mode. I'd run it up. I would remove this before I rappel and release it. I always like to have a nice long loop, especially on a really big tree. If this was a really big tree, if I'm going around a really thick trunk, I would leave an extra long loop here because we just want to always ensure that when we get it up there, if it rolls down a little bit, it never rolls over our loop. Okay, that's how you tie the Maverick. Let's go use it. Okay, so now here's a real world climbing situation. I just put a throw ball up in this tree, just a few feet up, and I have the left side ready to rig. So again, with that convention of the left being my load side. If I send this rope up on the left, comes down on the right, it'll be my load side. Now I could use my boat clips here, but I'm going to just go ahead and use a that Running Highwayman's is a great way to affix a line. See my prior video, I won't even lock it. I found that I don't need to. That's the Running Highwayman's. And I could put that using my JRB end loop up and over the tree. Now, when I SRT climb, I typically already have my friction hitch on the line, but you might not have one. You might be using a mechanical device. This video is about the anchor. So I've got the line now down around my feet. I have the option. I could remove this line and use a soft toggle, but I'm going to be coming right back down again. And so I'll simply tie the Maverick, and I'm going to lock it with a carabiner. It's just easier. If I've got the carabiner, might as well use it. And I'll send it up into the tree. It's locked, right? It can't be unintentionally released. Okay, so again, you might be using any device in the world to climb, but here's another option. 3-4. This is the recently published Agile Hitch. And I can climb on that. Not many friction hitches which I can reliably brake under the load of my body. I'll engage my redundancy. We're going to do a very short climb. Okay, so we've gotten to height, and we would be here, potentially for hours or all day. When it's time to rappel, again, we could bring down the hitch intact, but I'm going to go ahead and remove my lock so that it is ready to be released. I then transition into rappel. If you've seen my prior work, you know I'm a fan of the Munter friction hitch. I can brake the Agile hitch, brake it under the load of my body, rappel down. And now, with this unloaded, you can get an idea for how difficult, or actually how simple it is to release this. So I'm just going to be tugging on this, and that's it. That's it. So compared to the Running JRB Hitch, this is more consistently able to be released with minimal effort. One of the reasons I got on this venture to begin with was simply that there were certain times when the Running JRB Hitch, I always could get it down, but sometimes I really had to pull on the line to get it down. Sometimes it jammed up, and I have done thousands of tests with this, and I've never had a situation where it is not easy to release. Okay, so here you saw me introduce recently the concept of a floating anchor. Well, instead of paracord, I've got this high visibility line here. I'm going to go ahead and make a Running Highwayman's and put my line up through that. And you'll recall from that video, I always stand away from the tree when I'm doing this. I'd have to be much further away if this anchor were higher. Obviously we wouldn't need an anchor in a tree with this many crotches, but you get the idea. But now, instead of using the Running JRB Hitch, I can use the Maverick. It is consistent and it's reliable. I'll lock it. And I'm not planning on actually doing this climb, so I'm going to run it up there unlocked, so you can get an idea. Stand away from the tree. Ratchet it into the tree. Now obviously I'm not going to go ahead and climb on this just to save you some time. I will load it with my body weight. So it's seeing my body weight. But now this is easier to release than the Running JRB. I would have unlocked it at the top of my climb. And you get the idea. And now I can bring the whole thing down. Okay, so the scenario that I am likely to use this hitch the most is in my hitch climbing. So I just arrived at a tree. I've got my pole. I've got a video on how to create a pole for hitch setting. And this is my hitch climbing system, right? It's a rope-based system with my hitches already on it. But with this telescoping pole, I can set this potentially pretty high, you know, depending on the height of your actual pole. So let's go ahead and put this on the tree. I chose a little bit of a big tree. I chose a little bit of a rough tree. So when I'm doing this, I always use the soft toggle because I don't want anything metal rubbing, smacking against the pole. So that's about as far as I can reach. So with that now in a horizontal position, I'm going to push up on pole while pulling down on the line. You see it's shortening, and I get to that point and I just wiggle up and down to get all the slack out I can. And then I'm just going to leave my pole hang there. I got that idea from Bud. Thanks, Bud, great idea. Now, my hitch climbing system, already on the line are some friction hitches. And I'm going to climb on them. So quite obviously I could rappel. Well, let's set another hitch. Now that all tension has been removed from the lower hitch, I simply unlock it and release it. So this is where, of course, I would attach my platform and spent an indefinite amount of time here. When it's time to come down, first thing I'll do is unlock. I've unlocked the Maverick, so it is ready to be retrieved. I'm rappelling, of course, on the Munter friction hitch. If at any time during the climb I want to stop, remove a platform, my JRB sender will catch me. Come down slow, you can feel it getting warm. You can always feel that. Just want to come down slow, manage heat effectively. Now I'm going to do something right now. I'm obviously in a safe position. I will survive this potential fall. But let's go a little lower. It's a great place to do an experiment where my butt's just a few feet off the ground. So this is a quick release hitch, right? There's danger that you could pull on this. Well, let's see how hard it is for me to hurt myself. Let's pull on this. Okay, so that's all I got. Okay, I got it to move a little bit, but you get my point. It would take a lot of effort to accidentally release yourself. I I don't actually want it to be impossible. There are situations, for example, let's say an arborist needed to be rescued and all they had was the dexterity to remove their lock, but then their ground crew could release them under load. We want it to be possible, but difficult. But once I get my weight off of here, now it's a breeze. Now it's easy. So that move there is a little easier. It's a little less resistance than the Running JRB, but it's more consistent. More consistency in that release there. I don't ever wind up in a situation where, oh darn, I'm not going to be able to get this down. I'm always able to get this one down. And again, with the Running JRB, there were times where I had to put almost my whole body weight on that. And if that's ever the case, you can always put a carabiner on the end of your rope, right? At any place on a climbing rope, or a cord, you need to get a good grip on something, more than you can get with your fingers, right? There's ways to do that, right? I showed you how in any place on a climbing line, you can just pop in a bull hitch, right? You don't need your eyes for that either. And you can put on a carabiner, and now you can get your whole body weight on that. Just remember those tools in your toolbox. The only thing I ask is that if you decide to use this, you take responsibility for your actions, you learn to tie it, and you're 100% certain of how you tied it. You never send it up in a tree without it being locked. And make the hitch earn your trust. Don't start out with using the quick release feature. Draw it back a few times. Make sure that you've got the hitch properly tied and it has earned your trust. Safely try the experiment I just did, where you test its ability to be released under load, but not in a situation where you would hurt yourself. Don't be in a rush. One of the reasons, I've been working on this for about a year. When I did the 6 retrievable tether and rappel anchors, that was almost a year ago. I had this under development, but I just wasn't finished testing yet, and I don't want to give you anything right before the hunting season that I hadn't spent a good year testing. I take this seriously. I take my life seriously, and I take yours even more seriously if you attempt to use any of the methods that I am using. So I'm trying to share for the right reasons, but I want you to know that the 1/3 of a penny I get from a YouTube video view really isn't a big motivator for me, but keeping your butt safe is. And so please take that to heart. Thank you.